Welcome, everyone, to the first distinguished lecture seminar of this semester. It is my pleasure to introduce Maya Ackerman. Maya will talk about generative AI for creative applications. She is the CEO of Web AI that was basically generating music much before all this frenzy about ChatGPT and other chatbots. And she's also a professor in Santa Clara University. Maya, thanks for coming here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me, Ricardo. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, today we get to talk about my favorite topic, and that's generative AI applied to creative applications. Let's get started. We'll talk about a little bit of prehistory, then we'll compare creative minds versus machines, kind of trying to ground our understanding of creative machines in how we understand creativity in humans, and then discuss some core concepts which help us think about creative machines, and finally look at some illustrations of how these systems can work specifically from musical AI. So a little bit of prehistory. I wanted to start by playing you a little piece of music. This piece was not composed by a human. It was in fact created around the 1980s by a machine called AMY, which stands for Experiments in Musical Intelligence, by Professor David Cope out of UC Santa Cruz. He was experimenting with machines that write music in the style of the great classical composers. And he actually got a lot of pushback back in the 80s for doing so. He once came to a music conference sharing that he had discovered a new Bach piece. And everybody got super excited until he revealed that the piece was actually created by his AI system. And then everybody got really upset at him. So this sort of discomfort with musical AI, and musical AI that actually creates quite wonderful pieces, is not really new. We've also had some incredible work on the art side, also since about the 1980s, although some work goes back to the 1950s in both music and art. Here is a system called Aaron, made by Harold Cohen, who passed away just a few years ago. He was a professor at UC San Diego, and he actually created machines that made art before it was easy to put pixels on a screen. He had these massive robot arms putting paint on the drawings that his system made, gradually taught his system from making these abstract type of paintings, gradually taught it how to set up realistic scenes with humans. And as you can tell, even back then, using completely different methodologies, fingers were still a problem. That's something that more recent text-to-image models are finally starting to fix. And here is Harold Cohen. So again, creative machines, creative AI, it was not born last November, but rather, let me share this, but rather it's something that we've had in the academic realm for decades, for a very, very, very long time. What took a while is sort of the awareness about these creative machines in the popular press and the public consciousness. And I love it that we've had so many articles in the press saying, first song ever made with AI. This especially was the case of kind of these type of headlines as industry began to enter the space. So it was around the 2010s, 2015s that industry started getting involved. So you see there are decades in there of academics doing it sort of without industry's involvement. sure you remember Deep Dream, these incredible images that Google released. There was a bug in their image recognition system, which ended up creating these kind of hallucinatory images that just kept discovering whatever it is that they wanted to see. So it was a really neat thing that Google released and made quite a splash with for a bit. Then there was Google Magenta, and what made them unique for a while is that they were really focusing on a purely machine learning driven approach to music generation. Whereas, for example, David Cope's example that I showed you earlier was an expert system. So it's kind of the older way of doing AI, where you're sort of telling it exactly what to do instead of having it learn from data. Microsoft's journey turned out to be really important. I mean, we all know IBM Watson, right? Watson Chef, Watson Beats. They've done so many things, sort of so much AI under this name, Watson. Microsoft, yeah, that's really the main one I wanted to focus on because they're just so important for the way things ended up playing out. They had Tay back in 2016, lasted for only 16 hours because within that span of time, because it was learning from Twitter, from user behavior on Twitter, it managed to become just incredibly racist, became a Holocaust denier within this short time span and was taken down. So I believe that Microsoft learned from this experience. And so what they ended up doing with OpenAI is really brilliant. OpenAI is essentially Microsoft. They treat it like one of its legs. They're a major stakeholder in the company. And yet it's not as tightly associated with the Microsoft brand in the public consciousness, especially earlier, in the earlier days of OpenAI, before the ChatGPT kind of splash. And so, of course, OpenAI kind of eventually got to GPT-3 and DALL-E. And DALL-E was a really big deal. They spent just incredible advertising dollars on that, which ultimately got a company called Stability AI, which I'm sure everyone has heard of by now, to come by a model and ended up raising $101 million back in November of 2022, which is last year. And because of this massive raise, the investment community sort of woke up to generative AI and its potential, and then ultimately, together with ChatGPT and the splash that made in December, that's when there was this kind of broad public awareness of generative AI. I think that's really interesting. I think it's really interesting sort of what it took in reality for something that has existed for so long, that has been incredibly cool for so long, what it took for it to finally sort of make it to the surface. And it's not, perhaps not the way I would have guessed things would have gone. All right, so creative machines versus minds. Let's dig in a little bit. So nowadays, generative AI is nearly always a machine learning system, which means that it learns from data and it essentially creates a brain, right? And the data that we learn from most of the time is data made by humans. So if we're trying to do a text-to-image model, we are learning from images created by human beings. That's sort of the basis of it. So in a very real way, these machines are created in our own image, which I think is really poetic. Kind of an interesting initial point to understand what this is all about. Now, people often get caught up in saying, oh, the machines are never going to be as good as us. Or as they say, oh my goodness, they're going to be so much better than us and they're going to take over all of our creative jobs, which are both, justifiable perspectives. They're often said in the same breath. Like the person can be sort of expressing both of these perspectives at the same time because there's so much fear around it. I think it's helpful to realize that while these machines are inspired by us, they're not directly comparable to us. It's better to understand them as ultimately like an alien species roughly inspired by human beings. They are different. They're not sort of, just better or worse, just different. They also have this sort of incredible advantage over us, and that's the fact that they can learn from just incredible amounts of data. The kind of amounts of data that no human being can ever hope to consume. You're looking at earlier versions of the GPT models that have been trained on about 10% of the internet. It's just the way the human body, the way the human being works, we cannot ever hope to have the time to look at these volumes of data. And this gives us really interesting new possibilities with these machines that really extend beyond the type of intelligence, the type of creativity that human beings are capable of. Another incredible strength of creative machines is just how well they explore the creative space. So when you're writing a song, let's say you're trying to come up with the first melody of your song, there are so many possibilities. It's a universe of possibilities. If you're coming up with a title for your book, again, it's just a vast search space. And it's hard for a person to search through such an enormous search space. Doesn't mean that we don't come up with some great ideas, but ultimately we can't really peruse through the space of possibilities when the space is large enough. And creative machines help us do that. They're very, very, very good at exploring the space of creative possibilities, especially for short artifacts like a line of lyrics or a title or a short melody. They're just so good at sifting through and sort of navigating that creative space of possibilities a lot more intentionally than the way that human creativity functions. So the result, they make for an incredible partner. They have certain strengths, we have certain strengths, and sort of the partnership is where I see a lot of the most powerful possibilities. All right, so this is sometimes not taken very seriously, but I think it should be. So machines don't directly encode emotions in them. They learn from the data. The data might have some emotion in there, and it might sort of pick up on it implicitly. But the human machine, the role of emotions is just so critical in our decision making. So if somebody's had a lobotomy, if their left and right hemisphere of their brains are not communicating, then you really can't make decisions. And that's in part because the emotions can't reach certain parts of the brain. If there is damage to the emotion centers of the brain, you also, like, people find themselves unable to decide what to wear in the morning. I mean, it's very, very extreme, the extent to which emotion plays a role in human intelligence and human creativity. And that's not how machines operate, but I think it does give us certain advantages in our ways of thinking. What's even more critical, though, is that the reason we would want to consume some kind of art, look at it, listen to a song especially, but perhaps also look at a piece of art, is because we believe that there is a human on the other end trying to communicate some sort of emotion, has some sort of agency, has some sort of plan, wants to share something with us, because humans like communicating with each other. We want to know what another person has to say through art. And machines, again, they don't really function like that, even though you can sort of try to bend and twist them and try to make an argument that perhaps they do, but ultimately that's not how they function. So we maintain some kind of advantage, I think, can be extracted from this. You can also argue that humans are still better at making coherent things. Now, the gap here is closing. It used to be that, you couldn't create, using machine learning methods, you couldn't create a song that was even a minute long without it sort of meandering in different directions and having no coherence. Stories that went beyond a few sentences would sort of lose all focus. That is getting better. ChatGPT can technically write stories that are longer and remain coherent. We've had the same progress with text-to-audio models, having some coherency for slightly longer songs. There are other problems, other challenges remaining there, but coherence is definitely getting better. That being said, at the moment, when it comes to the kind of stories you would actually want to read, the kind of music you would actually want to listen to, humans maintain a significant advantage when it comes to longer form storytelling, longer form music that you would actually want to consume as creative works of art. Whereas short form, very, very short text, short music, the coherence gap doesn't really exist anymore. Okay, moving on to some core concepts. Okay, this one's really important. Convergence versus divergence. So when it comes to even human thinking, convergent thinking is being able to find the right answer. So when you're looking at things like math, largely things like history, where there is a sense of truth, it's not maybe as convergent as mathematics or physics, but in history, there's still, you can still give the wrong answer. A lot of human subjects are convergent. There is a sense of truth. And then there are creative applications, like writing music or stories, coming up with a dance choreography. Those are divergent applications. There is no right answer, per se. There is no sense of ground truth. So when you build creative machines, when you build generative AI in general, you need to make a choice if you're going convergent or divergent, because that's really going to impact how you construct your model, how you iterate it to get responses. So if you look at something like ChatGPT, it kind of tries to straddle both worlds. They branded it as a chatbot, which means that whether it's good at it or not, we expect it to give somewhat correct answers, at least on simple questions. And we get sort of confused, we get uncomfortable when it's unable to do that. And at the same time, people also use ChatGPT for creative applications, like coming up with a title, like help writing a story. So you can tell by the way ChatGPT is built in that it's primarily trying to be convergent. It's trying to give you the truth. So even if you ask it for something creative, there is a certain level of consistency in its answers. If I ask it to write a story about a talking bee and I generate it 100 times, there's going to be some level of consistency in the stories it gives me, even though there's this vast universe of possibilities about, a story about a bee. If, on the other hand, if you build a system that's really meant to be divergent, it's a system that doesn't have to worry about ever telling you the truth. You can do a much better job at being creative if you're not constrained by convergent applications. So that's something that to keep in mind, that there's an inherent tension between these two, and it's an important decision early on. And generative AI kind of leans divergent. It's very, very, very difficult to make a generative AI system genuinely convergent. It sort of keeps wanting, inherently, by the way generative AI functions, it sort of fits better in this direction, but you can kind of try to pull it towards convergence. All right, another really key thing, and this is really a spectrum, and that's this distinction between autonomous and co-creative systems. So initially, when most people learn about generative AI, when academics were first discovering it as well, the assumption is that we're looking at mostly an autonomous entity. Oh, look at this song made entirely by an AI. Oh, look at this art that doesn't have any human input. It's just made entirely by a machine. And that's really where the excitement begins. And then we're like, oh, yeah, you can also collaborate with this machine. Okay, what does that mean, to collaborate with a machine? It's a really kind of diverse concept. If you're collaborating with somebody, if you're collaborating with another person, you could be doing most of the work. I mean, who has not had the experience of collaborating with another person on a school project and you ended up doing almost everything? Or maybe the opposite. Maybe you worked with somebody, maybe you got sick and then they ended up doing almost everything. Or maybe you focused on what you're good at and they focus on what they're good at. Or maybe you both did the same stuff, but just shared the work. There are so many ways to collaborate with another person. And there are definitely lots and lots and lots of different ways of collaborating with a machine. And in my opinion, this is really where the opportunity is. When it comes to creative generative AI, the real opportunity, the real power, the real value to humanity comes with how do we work with our machines so that we become more creative, so we can go further? In a way, this slide addresses not sort of a subtle point, but rather what all this generative AI stuff is all about. I feel that on some level, the world is not entirely ready for generative AI. We're having so many problems accepting it, so many problems understanding how to build it into society, because we live in a world where ownership is really important. And that's all right, we have a lot of really good reasons for it, but it conflicts with generative AI, which is trained on all of our data. So if we have this highly intelligent, like brilliant, incredibly creative entity, and ChatGPT, I mean, that everybody's familiar with, is just the beginning. It just barely scratches the surface of what's possible. But, ultimately, we can create increasingly more and more amazing brains, amazing minds that are creative and intelligent in a way that is just completely unprecedented. And that's all done by training on all of our data that had been created by people over spans of centuries, really. If you look at the data on the internet, some of it is taking data from many, many years before the internet's formation. And so we end up with this kind of collective consciousness. And then what do you do with the collective consciousness? How do you, like, who owns it? Who gets to use it? Who owns what gets created with it? It's really challenging to all of our systems that are really not built for this sort of collective consciousness minds that are being created right now. Now, of course, it's not all fun and games. The collective consciousness comes with kind of a collective unconscious as well, because our data reveals more about us than we would like. Our data tells who we really are, not who we aspire to be. That's a really important distinction. We want to be fair to everybody. We want to treat everybody equally. And our collective unconscious reveals that that's not the case. Pretty much any system, any machine learning driven generative AI system is going to unintentionally reproduce the biases that are hidden in the data. So in particular, I've been doing a lot of work analyzing gender bias in generative AI models. We specifically look at what's called the brilliance bias, which is the implicit assumption that intellectual brilliance, that if you have a person who's a genius, then it's probably somebody of a male gender. And that's an implicit bias that people develop around between ages of 5 and 7. And that bias, we have found just overwhelming evidence of that bias in all the popular text-to-image models, as well as the GPT models. It's just really, really prevalent in the data, and so it ends up coming out in the models, which of course is a big problem, because as the models become more and more ubiquitous, they're reinforcing these biases that we're trying to move away from. And of course, brilliance bias is just an example of one bias that we find in these models. There's just so much more. There's a lot of racial biases as well that you discover in these models, and they just they reveal these biases just all over the place. I mean, it leaks very, very easily into all of these models' outputs. I do want to clarify that I think there's too much kind of like black and white thinking when it comes to these machines. There's like, people would say, oh, these machines are wonderful, we should all be using them. Or someone else would say, oh, these machines have biases, nobody should use them. And I think it's really important that we have kind of more nuance and more patience, perhaps, with this, technology that's new for the world. And just because we can find problems with it and we see ways to improve it doesn't mean that we need to get rid of it. Just because we see its beauty and the wondrous things it can create doesn't mean that we shouldn't criticize it. So I think it's important to sort of be able to hold these different perspectives in mind at the same time to accurately understand and properly develop these machines. So what I focus on in my work is really how can we use AI to elevate rather than diminish human creativity. It can be used to do both. It can be used to replace jobs. It can be used to make people sort of like helpless, a little handicapped creatively. So again, I'm not here to say that generative AI itself is inherently helpful, but it can also be used to genuinely, profoundly elevate human creativity in a way that really nothing else can. It can be, like I call this humble creative machines. It can be your own personal creative assistant that's incredibly brilliant, but whose whole purpose is to support your creative growth, and which sort of never needs to be in the spotlight, never needs to insist on its ideas, really designed in a way that channels its capabilities towards improving your creative abilities. And the main aspect to make that happen is what I call a creative control and autonomy. And that's the idea that the machine should never insist on itself. Very often with generative AI systems, even those that are designed to be co-creative, you ask it for something, you write, the equivalent of a prompt, and you get a whole picture. Or you write a prompt and you get a whole song. And then you need to figure out, oh, how do I now make the changes that I want to make? How do I interject myself into this work of art? And often it's very difficult. Adobe Firefly actually is making really good strides in this direction, letting you highlight a portion of an image and asking to regenerate that part, which I think is a really good step forward, at least kind of letting you zoom into specific sections of the image, which is more than a lot of text-to-image models allow for. In other domains, we're going to see some examples of this for music in particular, how that can be done. That's more bottom-up, where you're really participating in all the creation, and the machine, if you can do something yourself, you should never be forced to rely on a machine to do it, right? So let's say if you're a singer and you want to make a song and you want to sing on it, the machine should not force you to use an automated voice. If you are an amazing lyricist and that's how you want to contribute to your music, the machine should not force you to use machine-generated lyrics, etc. Anywhere where you can function autonomously, you should maintain that autonomy. I think the machine should also make you better. It should help you learn. So as you use the machine, you should become better at the task autonomously. So if you're using a machine to help you write lyrics, after you use it a few times, you should be able to write lyrics by yourself. I mean, that's a real sign that you're using something that's helping you, like you're working with another person who's helping you. That should be what's happening. You should become more independent over time rather than less independent. Again, we're not seeing a lot of that out in industry, but I'm going to show you how that can work. All right, so some illustrations from Musical AI. We're going to do a demo in a moment, and hopefully the demo kind of helps you understand how a machine can be kind of a humble creative machine that helps you be more creative for other verticals as well. This is meant as an illustration of the concepts. First, I wanted to kind of briefly show you how far we've gotten. I've been running Wave AI, my company Wave AI, since 2017. We released our first successful commercial product a couple of years ago. By now, we've had #1 hits, and we've had songs that have streamed millions of times. So the tools I'm going to show you are used by people brand new to music making, but also used by top professionals. So let's make a song with AI. Let's go here. All right, so I want to try to make it so that I can see some messages as we do this, so that we attempt to do this collaboratively. Okay. So let's make we're gonna make a song here. Let's go for pop as a genre. And I would love for people to help me pick some topics. So you can just type the topic into the chat, please. Let's see if we can get some kind of participation here. Can people please, type any of the topics you see here on the screen into the chat to figure out the kind of song we should create. Oh, okay, maybe there is no, maybe you can't participate in this way. Okay, well, I'll just do a demo more.
And Maya?
Yeah.
They're participating in the Q&A, so you already have Hope, Broken Heart, and if you want, for me, you put some Fear.
Hope and Fear. Perfect. Thank you.
Broken Heart.
And Broken Heart. Well, we can only do 2.
Okay.
So we can get rid of 1. Broken Heart is actually really good. We can do Fear and Broken Heart. All right. Thank you. So the way it works is the AI starts off by generating some initial lines to start our song. Now, you don't have to use them. People who are more professionals often just start off with some lyrics they already have, or they come up with the first line. But let's do it this way for now. So let's see. The darkness of my soul. Won't you save me from myself? That's kind of good, right? Kind of good.
There are many more, Maya, if you need in the Q&A.
Oh, okay. More. Oh, I see the Q&A. Okay, I see. Wonderful. No, this is good. This is good to start. So, won't you save me for myself? I don't know how to get out. Won't you help me be myself? I've been searching for someone else. Okay. Can we go dark? Okay. Won't you take me away from this hell? So you see, when somebody's brand new to songwriting, you see this sort of behavior. They click a lot. They might make a small modification in the text. Okay. Okay. Won't you save me from myself? I've been searching for someone. Let's just remove the word else. Won't you take me away from this hell? I cry for help and my heart just melts. Let's just do it like that. See, you kind of just modify it a little bit. Okay, how about this? I've been searching for someone. Won't you save me from myself? Won't you take me away? I cry for help, but my heart just melts. Well, that's kind of cute. You can imagine that being part of maybe a chorus. A chorus. Okay, so as you start writing your own material, things start to get really interesting. So if I type my own line, if I type something like, I see my pain leading down your tears. Let's generate something. So now it's taking into account my writing style. So you can see here, I can kind of easily take control from the system. I can be like, okay, I'm writing now. Now you help me expand on my ideas. I see my pain bleeding down your tears. You don't have to cry anymore. Hear your voice break the nightmares. Oh, that's so cool. Like it understands what I'm writing, and it also understands the way that I'm writing. It's understanding how I'm using the metaphors. You can go further and have it ignore the topics, so then it's even sort of more honest to what you're writing. It always gets me really excited to see the AI really understanding what I'm doing. I see you burning in the flames. I see my life fading away. Okay. Ooh, I feel the pain piercing through your skin. It's painful to read, but it's really understanding what I'm doing here. I kind of like this little creation we're making here. But then I want to show you. Okay, the end is drawing near. Oh, it's really depressing today. Okay. Now if I go in a completely different direction and I say I be writing down this old hood, why not? And that's without even changing genre. You will see the AI just do a 180 and follow me wherever I want to go, essentially. Let's see what it comes up with for us. Okay, I'd be chilling in the club, right? So it's again, it's understanding my style, and it's kind of understanding the subject matter. But what's really important is not necessarily just these two extreme points, one sort of extreme rap example and another one, a really sort of hardcore metaphor. But it's that anywhere you go, any style that you have, we've seen musicians come in with styles we have not considered, and the AI just quickly adapts to what they're doing. So as you can see here, I can be writing 90% of it myself and just asking it for help when I need to. I can generate it a lot just to come up with a lot of ideas and then write it all and then kind of like use these initial ideas to expand on it myself. I can be leaning on it very heavily instead. So there is this flexibility and sense of complete control that I have when I use it, because I can always ignore it. I can always disregard it. I can always have it follow me instead of me follow it. And that's what I feel. That's what I feel is missing out in the world in a lot of commercial systems. This respect for human autonomy, for human growth. When people use this system, they become better lyricists. We have some users who have used our stuff for a month and they say, I don't need it anymore. Now I can write well by myself, which is fine. And then we have professionals use it just to be faster, or professionals using it because they're just missing that third verse. The third verse is often very hard to write. You already wrote all the ideas you had in the first two verses. But it helps them sort of explore the creative space. That's a level of flexibility and simplicity that really we need from generative AI systems that purport to help human beings. Okay, let's take this second paragraph here. Let's put some music to it. I'm gonna have to think sound is working. Okay, so we get to pick if it's a major or minor key. That's our other product, Melody Studio. We're gonna check out some progressions. Tell me in case you can't hear it. Or something else. Pretty good. All right, we'll make it a little bit faster. Okay, so I'm just going to copy in here the lyrics that we already made. And I'm going to show you sort of the magic here. The system actually has a lot of different components. You have chords, for example. So, you can generate new chord progressions, but that's old technology. What's really sort of the heart of Melody Studio is this top melody generator. There's just a universe of possibilities for how you can sing I see my pain bleeding down your tears. So let's hear some of them. It's not bad. We can select that. Let's check out a different option. Okay, so lots of possibilities. I kind of like that first one. Now you can go in here and you can change it. You're always in control. You can make it longer. You can change the pitch. You're in full control of what you're creating. You can also punch in your own notes, kind of. You can do it completely without the AI if you want to as well. Hear my voice, break the nightmare. Let's come up with a quick melody for the second line here. So when you generate the second melody, it bases it in part on the first melody. It's pretty good. Let's go for that. I see my life fading away. Just gonna quickly fill it in so we can really play the whole song for you. I see my life fading away. It's not bad. Now, if I was to do this myself kind of for real, I would spend a lot more time on each melody. I would modify them a lot more. let's hear our little song. Let's see how it comes together. We have here very much the beginning of a song. We're making a song. We're really exploring the space of creative possibilities here. And again, just like with Lyric Studio, we are really in full control of this process. And then, we can export this. We can put different instruments to it in a digital audio workstation. Again, you control what lyrics you have, what chord progression you have. You can have more control of the chords in a different format. And again, you can always modify, you can always enter your own melodies. I think this is so important to have AI that serves human creativity in a way that's sort of sincere and that also doesn't make us dependent on the AI, doesn't make us sort of in servitude of the AI, but the other way around. Just like with the lyrics, when you use this for a bit, what starts to happen, I'm so proud of this, I don't get to talk about this very often. What starts to happen when you generate melodies is you start to understand melodies better. You start being able to kind of see which melodies you're going to like. You can almost hear them in your head a little bit the more you use this. And it makes sense. It's just practice, right? You keep generating melodies, you keep listening to them. Over time, your brain starts making a connection with what a melody looks like to how it sounds. And then another thing that starts to happen is you become better at coming up with melodies by yourself. So the whole thing is designed to sort of leave you more rather than less empowered. All right, let's go back to our slides. Okay. Yeah, that's it. That brings us to the end of the demo. I want to thank everybody sincerely for the opportunity to share this with you today, and I look forward to receiving your questions.
Thank you, Maya. Fascinating presentation, especially that it's so easy to create a song even if you don't understand anything about music, like me. So Liz will also now read the questions that is in the Q&A.
Wonderful.
Hello, everybody. Just going through the Q&A right now, trying to pick out the juiciest questions. Ricardo, would you mind reading the first one?
Sure. Well, first, I think it's a comment from Ken Church saying that the day was not the first time Microsoft ran into trouble like this. When he worked at spelling correction, they were responding to a bug report where they corrected Obama to Osama, which is a problem. and long before that, this happened also in another application, and there is basically a link to a news that I think I went to there. So that happened in 1 second. That happened in 1999, so a long time ago, when basically Microsoft was accused of racially charged message. So I guess what you mentioned, that not only music was generated strongly before, but the bias problem was also happening much earlier. So the first question is from Mike Bennett. It says, given your thoughts on collective consciousness and the problems you describe with the system property system, I wonder if you can describe changes to those systems that you think might work better with the creations of generative AI.
Okay, so 1 second. So collective consciousness, and then what aspects would work better?
And the problems you describe it with the system proprietary systems.
Oh, I see. Oh, that's such a good question. I appreciate it. That's a great question. Okay, so what do we do? How do we make it better?
Yes.
I mean, there are obviously the solutions that some companies are going. So Adobe, because they have an image database they are able to kind of train on data that they own, which is great. I mean, it's great when you can do that. And I think that's part of the solution, right? Just sort of owning the data. But there's something unsatisfying about it, because you're never going to own all the data, and you can build a better system if you own more and more data, right? And so my hope actually is that this challenges our systems a little bit, that it gets us to think. I'm afraid to say it, because I mean, it's such a sensitive topic in this country, but do we really have to like own everything? Is it okay if there is something that we all own? You know, let's say we all own this generative AI model. It's trained on all of our data in a kind of broad sense of what the word all means, all of humanity. And then if we create something with it, it's in a public domain. You know, that's one solution that's being explored. Why do we need everything to be like attached to a person? Why can't something just sort of exist for all of humanity? So I'm hoping that like what I see happening is that really we just don't end up using generative AI in the best ways, because we're so locked in our ways of thinking. And that's what I hope can change.
Perfect.
So this question is also very important because I have the same question in some sense. So you said that the system was understanding you, but then one person is asking if it really is understanding, or you are just generating the next best words, and it's just pattern matching. And I believe it's not understanding, but we try to humanize these things, and we say that it's understanding, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's I mean, it's all just bits and bytes and prediction, right? And then, you know, I heard one speaker say, well, how do you know that what you're doing is not just predicting the next thing? And I think it's a legitimate question. I mean, we know that our brains don't work exactly like machines' brains, but also a concept like understanding, or, you know, most human concept, most words we use are just concepts, you know, it's just wrapping human behavior into a comprehensible concept. Interacting with it, if it was a person, I would use the word understand. I would say it understands me. And so I guess I give myself permission to allow myself to use the same language with an AI collaborator as I would with a human collaborator. And I think there is value sort of in holding both ideas, allowing yourself to use these shortcuts because you're, you know, I'm thinking about the machine as a collaborator, but also keeping in mind that it is fundamentally predicting, right? That's how it functions underneath. So you're absolutely correct. The person.
Now, Walid Sama asked the question related to what we humans call creativity. Are the systems generating anything new, or generating combinations of human creations? In other words, do these generative AI systems really create anything really new, or they very intelligently and coherently stitch together human creations so they are finite while human creativity is infinite?
I like the last
it's
line.
new or not? So the question is the music new, or is the lyrics new, or it's just pieces of human things or that already existed?
Yeah, so creativity is two things. It's not just novelty, it's novelty and value. So first of all, let's establish that originality alone, novelty without value, is absolutely trivial. Go ahead and generate, you know, random pixels that nobody has ever done before, create random notes that sound horrible that nobody has come up with. Novelty alone is trivial. Okay, novelty plus value, which I'm sure is what is the intended meaning, you know, original but valuable. So the short answer is yes. But there's something called the Turing test, which, you know, I've been using a variation of it in the computational creativity community for decades. If a human made this, would we consider the work creative? And I think, and you know, you can conduct the Turing test by actually showing the work of art or the music to other people, not revealing that it was machine made. And you see two things. First of all, a lot of work that's been created with machines even decades ago, even before we had some of the amazing technologies we have today. Through the Turing test, people consider it creative. If they know that a machine made it, suddenly they're like, ooh, not so creative anymore, right? So there is, if people know that the work that they're judging is made by a machine, then it's sort of creativity drops in their minds. But even if you kind of consider it from another perspective, if you look at sort of just how these systems work, and how our creativity works, it's pretty unambiguous that they're capable of creating new material, because just exploring the creative space of possibilities, you can train it on existing data, but essentially what you do through that is open up the space of creative possibilities, and it is searching within that space well beyond what the input data is if you build the model properly. So it's not recombining, it's really learning from the data.
Just to comment that Turing never called what we call a test. He called it the imitation game. So he was not thinking in the same way that we use what he did. So for him was imitation.
Yeah, for sure. His well, actually, the original Turing test wasn't meant to assess creativity.
Exactly.
What I was describing was kind of an adaptation of the Turing test to the creative domain.
Please.
Yep. All right. The next question is from Tao Long. I love your discussion on user anatomy in the context of AI interactions. Are there more thoughts or perspectives you can share about this, like future system design?
Yeah, human autonomy. There is really nothing more important than that. I mean, if I do nothing in my life but push generative AI to give people a little bit more autonomy than it gives them right now, then it would have all been worthwhile. It drives me crazy. I mean, you go to something like Midjourney, and I love Midjourney. All the pictures you saw in my presentation today were made with Midjourney. It's crazy cool. But like I have no control somehow. You know, even as I get better at designing these prompts, I'm like, well, I want a picture of a lawyer in the corner. There's just no way you can communicate it, and it's just crazy. And to the degree that I can make art, I can't incorporate that. So with Lyric Studio and Melody Studio, we worked very, very hard. Kind of the first principle is if a person can do something themselves, let them do it themselves. Don't help with what nobody asked you to help. Can you imagine, like, if you're working with a person and there's something that you want to do and they're like, no, I'm going to do everything, or no, I'm going to do that part. They just don't care that you want to do something. It's upsetting. It's upsetting with another person. It's upsetting with a machine. And really moving away from this desire to glorify the system. You know, people make these AIs. They're our babies in a way. And so there is some desire to be like, oh, look at what my machine can do all by itself. We need to move away from that. Okay, it's amazing all by itself, but now how can it help somebody? How can it help another person? Yeah, I should write a little article about this. There's a lot to unpack. It's a lot to unpack.
The next question is, can you add video? Video is important for music videos.
Yeah, Runway ML has really cool stuff around generative videos. I really like Runway ML. They are a very, very innovative group of researchers, and they have good commercial products. Yeah, we thought about adding stuff as well. We actually tried to add album art covers. We kind of built a system that does that. It's really interesting with commercial products. It's a surprise to me to what degree with a commercial product as a startup, how focused you need to be. Like, it's in terms of getting the right user base, in terms of not confusing the user base about what your offering is. Yeah, so that's the reason why we stay so narrowly focused on song creation.
Okay. Brian Eno once said, we need to stop thinking about art as a product, but as a trigger for experience. We don't have a repertoire for how to respond to the experience triggered by AI-generated art or music. Personally, how do you experience it differently than individually created music?
Oh, that's such a good question. I like that quote. Can I get it? Could somebody send it to me? That's so good. Yeah, I really appreciate the question and the comment. It's really, it's almost like that's part of the reason why I believe so strongly in co-creativity, in machines helping humans express themselves. Because while machine-made art can be fascinating, it can actually be really good elevator music. It can maybe be background music in a movie where you don't care. But if what you're trying to do is listen to music, we have this societal expectation that we're listening to music that comes sort of from another human soul, kind of expressing some other person's emotions. Yeah, and I think ultimately, to a large degree, I think that that's going to survive the generative AI revolution. I don't know if we care about, you know, a famous artist making, like we already have ghostwriters in music, right? Already, if you hear a song on the radio, the person singing probably didn't write it, you know, probably didn't create the music, even if they're associated with the music. But we still feel that we're communicating, that they're communicating something to us. And I think that's never going to go away. Regardless of how much the AI is doing in the background to help, we want to feel that we're communicating with another person. So I think this idea of what does it mean to listen to music made by AI? How do we sort of process that experience? I think resistance to that is gonna sustain for a very long time, even if there are going to be, you know, some fans of kind of niche fandom for autonomous AI artistic creations. I really would love to get that quote. That was super cool.
Of course. All right. I think we have time for one or two more. This comes from Martin. Thank you for your presentation. So interesting. I have two questions. How are businesses leveraging generative AI to innovate in creative domains? And what might be the economic implications of a future dominated by human-machine collaborative creativity?
Great questions, two great questions. So right now, the dominant use case you see is people taking large models, like large language models, and trying to find some other use cases for them. That's the most common. Most people in the startup ecosystem don't have the expertise in generative AI, and frankly, don't have the ability to build their own models. And so you have the companies that are building the large models that are then get licensed out to other startups that are more focusing on the use case. That's what I'm seeing. I think there would be a lot of value in companies building their own models so that they're really optimized for their specific use cases. Vertical models remain superior for their use cases compared to general models, general purpose models. As far as how this world is going to play out, I mean, again, it can play out in many different ways, this human-machine collaboration. I think it's going to take a little while to get there. I think we're going to see, most likely it's going to be a mixture. Like we're going to see some stifling of human creativity in some domains, especially where the tools don't give the person a lot of freedom. And we're going to see some, I mean, the potential here for elevating human creativity is just insane. Really, these machines make it possible to collaborate with the entire human race, like with all of humanity, which is wild. So it's like standing on the shoulders of all of humanity. So I think we're going to see, we're already seeing hints of that, right? We're going to see an explosion of creativity of the type that was just unfathomable before. So I think there are going to be these kind of magnificent like leaps forward in art, and there are going to be some hindrances and some stifling sort of at the same time. That's usually how history plays out. You have this thing and its opposite.
That is it for the Q&A for today. Thank you so much, Maya. I pass it back to you, Ricardo.
Yeah, thank you, Maya. I really agree with you on creativity and also in this very simple recommendation that if you can do something, do it yourself and not let the machine do it. I agree completely with that. So thank
Thanks
you
so much
again.
for having me.
Yeah, thank you for a great talk and remind all the people our next expedition. So we will have Rupal Patel from Northeastern University, and we will talk about generative voice. So this is related to generating music, but now what are the applications and implications of generating real voices, especially not only in nice applications, but also in disinformation. So thank you, and I hope to see you October 11 at 1 p.m. Eastern time again.